Buckle up. It's the Insurance Dudes Podcast.
Boom! Boom!
we like to boom into the podcast. Welcome, Lyneil Mitchell.
Welcome.
Backstory on this. I want to, so a few years ago, I injured my back and I got to a point where over a year period, I almost couldn't walk again. And my wife was like, you can't even pick up the kids. Like, you got to go to physical therapy. And of course, working in the agency, working nonstop, it was something that I didn't put on the front end until literally I couldn't move much at all. So I was on a mission to find a physical therapist. Luckily, Lyneil was at an office, and went in there, and we had a lot of the same thought processes. And Lyneil was able to bring me back to my peppy self again, and I go see him regularly. But it's so funny because I didn't realize how much experience Lyneil had at first. And as we've gotten to know each other, and I've heard some amazing stories and what he's been through, I thought that this was fantastic to talk about on the podcast. So welcome, Lyneil.
Love it. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. This is awesome. Very cool.
This is awesome. So before we get into it, Craig's going to drill you a little bit with what we like to call speed breakers. So the first thing that comes to your mind.
Yes. The rules are there are no rules. You just have to answer quickly is the only rule.
Okay.
All right.
46. That's always my answer to
you
these
could
questions.
You could 46. Say that. It's fine. There's no correct answer. And here we go. Have you ever had a mullet?
No.
First crush.
The name?
There's no rules.
The name of my first crush?
Yeah.
Oh. Lavon.
Lavon. Oh, that's Lavon and Lynn. Now I got thrown off. Most embarrassing thing your mom ever caught you doing? Be honest. All right, we know. Fastest speed you ever drove?
Like 120, so somewhere around there.
Favorite cereal?
Fruity Pebbles.
How many kids?
One.
Have you made cry?
A lot.
A lot. Good. Count Chocula or Count Dracula?
Count Dracula.
Fastest mile?
Probably 6 minutes something.
Favorite flavor?
Blueberry.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Thank you. Tacos or burritos?
Cats. Tacos.
That's the right answer. Trump or Biden? Nope. You don't have to answer that one. And you have just successfully navigated speed breakers. Congratulations, sir. You got 100.
Thanks. That's a good little warm up.
Nice.
It is. Hey, before we start,
I'm a high achiever.
Yeah,
you are. What was the first concert you ever went to?
Steve Miller Band, 1996.
Nice. That's a good one.
Oh yeah, it was really good. Yeah.
I saw Steve Miller open up for the Dead in the early 90s.
I was never into music, but my father was a DJ growing up, which was a pretty cool thing. So I was surrounded by music. Yeah. But I was really, into sports and school. And school kind of came easy to me, but my family just pushed school as a really important thing. I grew up really super blue collar. I'm actually half black and half white. So growing up in Pittsburgh, coming, up during that time as a African-American kid, as much as I don't look that way, I fit into that description, especially in our town. So education was a huge thing. So my parents really, really pushed it, but I just, for whatever reason, I was never into music. And basically, eventually as I hit, 10th, 11th grade, you had to start becoming cool, right? And start paying attention to music. But even at that Steve Miller concert, my girlfriend took me, and I kind of went kicking and screaming. I didn't even want to go. And it ended up being like this awesome experience. Yeah. And so as I got older, it was, a lot cooler for me because I knew all these songs, but I wouldn't have been able to tell you what name it was because all my dad did all day was make playlists for all these, events that he was doing. So I was like super into music in one way, and then in the other way, I wanted nothing to do with it. So it was pretty funny. And now I think back and I hear these songs, and I know that I heard it before from when I was like 6 years old, and my dad was playing it, and I have no idea what the song is, but I recognize it because he would play so much music all the time. So pretty cool.
When you hear a song, does it take you back to like that memory? Can you like feel, smell, and that's so crazy.
That's great.
I love that.
Yeah.
Dude, so take us back from
more now. Well, I notice it more now because I'm very big on like programming my day around the things that I listen to. I don't know if I've talked to you specifically about it. I know I've made some posts about being on an information diet, and a lot of people like to get up in the morning and do meditations and things like that. But I don't know what it necessarily has to be, but it should be something, right? And I think that, the information that we consume, especially auditorily, is really impactful to us, right? And it also has a big tie-in to the basically the emotional centers of our brain. It helps with memory. So a lot of sounds and smells as well are really, really heavily tied into the nervous system and memory. So you can really condition yourself by listening to the appropriate things. I had a patient I was talking to about this the other day that basically was having some issues with their mood, and I was like, well, you can really control your mood by just putting on your favorite song. Right. And so, and it goes along the same lines of whatever state that you want to get into, you can really facilitate that through what you're listening to. So what were you going to say next there? Sorry.
I love it, dude. You're such a smart dude. I want to go all the way back from Steve Miller and what brought you to where you're at today and all those experiences. I know, in context a little bit, I know you work with Rhonda Rousey, you work with some of the biggest WWE stars, you work with some of the biggest sports stars. Drop some names for me. I know Rhonda Rousey.
Yeah.
Who from the WWE have you worked
Dave
with?
Batista, Sheamus.
Yes. What?
Awesome.
Yeah. Samoa Joe. I'm drawing a blank here. A bunch of NFL players. Antonio Brown's probably the most famous one that I work with. Well, Troy Polamalu, it was after he had already retired. I did some work with him, but Antonio Brown, I worked with him. I think it was the 2013, 2014 seasons. I worked with him for the basically 2 years. I've had a lot of pretty cool experiences. And Rhonda was kind of like the biggest one of late, for sure.
I love that. So what got you into what you're doing today? I wanted to set the context because I think in that field, especially nowadays, you just hear a lot of people that are, they're personal trainer or they're a physical therapist. And it's like, they haven't really done that much. You know what I mean? So I wanted to set the context for you, but yeah, take us through your journey, man.
Well, I'll tell you, to add to that, I'm actually been working virtually and sometimes in person with Helen Maroulis. She was the Olympic gold medalist women's wrestling in 2016, and she's been having a lot of issues. I don't. Did you see her when you were coming in here? Did you meet her, Jason?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. So she's a stud, and she just got back to competing last week, actually, which was awesome. She had a ton of concussions, a lot of things that, are in the public eye. And it's been really cool because she's a real true wrestler. Not that, the WWE thing isn't, wrestling, because it's real wrestling in the sense of you're going through a lot of physical damage, and the athleticism and the professionalism that it takes to be a studio wrestler is still off the charts, right? But I wrestled in college, so I was a 2-time All-American in college, and I was just in general, like I was saying about the music situation, I was just always into sports. The town that I grew up in was a big sports town. We had really good sports programs through the 70s, 80s, and 90s when I was coming through, and everything was about basically being able to make the high school team. Like if you could even just make the high school team in my town, you were a stud, right? So the funny part is our sports now in my town have kind of gone down. And when I got to college, I really didn't know what I wanted to do other than play sports. So one of the interesting things about me is I went to a Division II school. only because I could wrestle. I had some other options, but I wanted to be able to wrestle and play football. So I got a scholarship to wrestle, and then basically they were going to let me play football. Well, after the first year of football, long story short, I decided to focus on wrestling. But then after doing wrestling for a whole year, which I had never done a sport year round, I was like, okay, I need to do something else just to keep the balance. And I ended up walking on and trying out for our baseball team. And I ended up pitching for the last 4 years of my baseball career, my college career. Yeah. So then I wasn't real sure what I was going to do education wise. I actually started out in computer information science.
What was your pitch? What was your go-to? Was it Heat? Or did you
I used to like to throw? I was more of a Heat guy. I'm a bigger guy. But I always used to like to mix in the knuckleball in there. Tim Wakefield there and those guys. But I'll tell you, the funny part is I got a lot of home runs hit off of that knuckleball. Actually,
as soon as they figure it out.
And you leave it hanging in there sometimes, and it's like a big meatball. Right? Yeah. So. And again, one of the things that was really tough, wrestling and baseball aren't really very compatible sports, right? So in wrestling, you get super tight and you're working on a lot of strength training and, hypertrophy in terms of your muscle development. And then basically in baseball, you have to be this flexible, elastic, person that's, using their arm as a whip. So it was always really hard for me to follow wrestling season with baseball, but I would do it because I just loved it so much. So it was one of the big differentiating factors for me when I got done with PT school, with my exercise science degree, in my bachelor's. Most of the PTs that even to this day that I have met did not even play a college sport. Right. Just the rigor of your undergraduate prerequisite requirements to get into PT school is almost impossible for most athletes to do based upon the schedule that you have to do. And the funny part is I didn't know any better, right? I was just like, I want to play sports. This is it. I got to make it. Again, I grew up real blue collar. So the idea of ending up back at my parents' house, living with my dad was like, absolutely not. That was not going to happen. Right. So I was doing whatever I could to move on with my career. And somewhere along the lines, I realized that I didn't want to do computer science, and I shifted towards exercise science as my degree, which then my college wrestling coach offered me a grad assistantship to stay and coach and basically be the strength and conditioning coach for the wrestling team at my college, which was a really cool experience. So as I was going through PT, I'm basically, pretty much way ahead than most of the other peers in my group, especially at that age. Number one, I had already kind of become very successful at something, right? At one thing. I think most people never even get to be very successful at one thing. And you have to learn this kind of like transferable skill set to do that. So by the time I got to my graduate program, I didn't have a lot of the same interest as the other students that were there. And I had so much confidence that I was really willing to tackle a lot of things that they weren't. Now, a lot of them were actually more polished in the academic side because they basically had, this rigorous, training that they had went through. And I was focused on sports. Right. So basically it was kind of a separating factor for us. So then when I got to the University of Cincinnati, so after I graduated from PT school with my DPT, I ended up doing a specialized training in residency for sports physical therapy at the University of Cincinnati and with the Cincinnati Bengals. And that was my first job out of school. So basically that was what ended up catapulting my career into the high level sports world. The funny part was I didn't really want to go into the high level sports world, but when you're looking at aptitude and things like that, it really suited me. I was really looking into going into more neurological disorders. I was really into traumatic brain injuries. I worked in a specialized traumatic brain injury unit at this hospital back in Pennsylvania, and I was super into it. And then I had this mentor of mine, and she was like, hey, so what are you going to do with your career? What do you plan on focusing in? And I'm like, I really like sports. I really like neuro. I'm not really sure. And she kind of dropped this big bomb on me and was like, well, Lyneil, you got to remember, it's all neuro. The body is controlled by the nervous system. Focus on that, and then it'll take you wherever you want to go. So the reason why I went to Cincinnati was because they had this specialized basically program that was with all these guru level sports medicine researchers and physical therapists that was based on the nervous system and how it integrated in with your muscles and your skeletal system to basically allow for, recovery from injuries and also performance enhancement in sports. Yeah. So during my decision-making process to go do this specialized residency program, I had linked up with this other guy that was mentoring me at the time that was a kind of a big wig in the American Physical Therapy Association. And I was kind of discussing these issues that I had. And he was like, well, you need to do residency. If you want to be, a doctor of physical therapy, if you really want to self-express, you need to take this to the next level, which a lot of people don't understand, that when you get out of school with your PT degree, you're kind of at entry level. And, if you really want to specialize in something, they have these programs that you can, participate in. One of the other things that goes along with this is we actually have 9 board specialties in physical therapy. You have pediatrics, cardiovascular, orthopedic, and sports. So there's all these different specializations that, people are typically very unfamiliar with. PT probably has one of the worst brandings of all the professions in the world right now. Nobody really understands, what we do, why we do it, how we do it, or anything along those lines. So I had actually interviewed for a similar program in Pittsburgh at the University of Pittsburgh. It's called UPMC, University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. And I wasn't going to be able to work with the professional athletes or the college athletes during the curriculum of this postdoctorate residency versus the one in Cincinnati. And also at Pittsburgh, I wasn't going to be able to have direct relationship and working relationship with the head guy. So at Cincinnati, I was going to be able to work with the head guru guy and the head guru of the research program, as well as be able to work with the pro athletes and the college athletes every day. So literally, like my first day, I walk in and, one of the cool parts of the story, they just opened this brand new facility when I was there. They just opened, and we had underwater treadmills and just all the brand new, technology that was going on in our field. And I ended up getting to go work with Carson Palmer, who was the quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals, right? And he was just finishing up his rehab after chemo from the Steelers fell on his knee. If you remember that injury, that Carson had. And the first thing they said was, don't you dare say anything about the Steelers. You keep your mouth shut. Don't you mention a word about the Steelers in front of this guy. So I'm a big Steeler fan being from Pittsburgh. You almost have to be. Right. So it was pretty interesting. Yeah. And so
he could have just shaken off.
No. Yeah. I mean, and again, that was one of the cool parts. My first experience was this big catastrophic knee injury that he had. I mean, he had basically torn everything in his knee, and then to see him, fully recovering and rehabbing and doing everything that he was doing, it was pretty impressive. But he was at the time, he was still having a hard time planning on his front leg and throwing. Like everything physically was fine with him, but psychologically, he hadn't overcome the fact that somebody had fell on his knee when he was throwing. So he would literally go to throw and the ball would go, 20 yards in the air over the guy's head. It was, it's like
PTSD, right? Like he just, it was stuck. Wow. It's amazing. Cause you don't want that to happen again. He probably played that over and over and over in his mind, that injury.
Well, and that's one of the things they don't really talk about in injuries in general. I think in society in general, right, is the psychological component. Most of what we deal with is psychological, right? And, the physical rehab also is catering towards that because we need to build confidence. And that's one of the things that I say all the time is that our real job as trainers and physical therapists are really to help improve somebody else's self-efficacy, right? Their own ability to set goals and achieve them. Again, if you're a quarterback and you need to throw and you're too afraid to put your foot down so you can throw, or just even walking, right? Coming back from an ACL tear, every step that you take is uncertain. So, and this also parallels over to business as well, right? We sometimes set a situation up for ourselves where, every step that you take, you're walking on eggshells and you can't sprint forward because if you take the wrong step, you're going to sprain your ankle or blow your knee. So you want to clear that path and have a safe approach so you can take off and run as fast as possible, right? And as safely as possible.
Well, fear is a physical response that's part of our reptilian brain, right? Like it's going to kick out the endorphins and all of that stuff. But the mental aspect of it, I mean, that's something we can eliminate. that's something that we need to control and work on, right?
Right. Well, that's the beauty of self-efficacy, right? Because it's true self-confidence, right? It's not delusions of grandeur. Self-efficacy only comes from setting goals and repeatedly attempting to try and be successful with them, right? And also getting used to failing. So that's a big issue with going through the rehab process, right? You're getting this kind of pure, it's one of the reasons why I say physical therapists are the best at functional training, because our science that we use behind the systems and the protocols that we use is all based on this progressive functional approach, right? So we're always going to look at taking somebody from a position of a lesser functional capability and bringing them up to a higher capability of function, but that it has to be a true functional transfer in terms of their, again, like I said, self-efficacy, but also their true abilities. So these things have to align correctly, or the person again ends up with these delusions of their capabilities, and that's when they end up having some type of injury or reoccurrence of the injury. Because again, what I specialized in was, how do you take an athlete after an ACL tear, an Achilles tear, or something like that, and decrease the chances of them getting re-injured as they go back into the most complex physical endeavor that a human has to go through, which would be professional sports, right? So you're not only trying to get them back to that point, you're trying to get them through that point to make sure that they don't get re-injured, which is the part that gets missed in most other physical therapy settings. And it's just unfortunate that our healthcare system doesn't pay attention to that, getting people through to the next phase scenario. It's kind of, hey, let's treat the symptoms and, we'll let you guys go on your own. Good luck. If you're somebody that's proactive, then you're going to get more out of it. But unfortunately, most people are reactive, right?
Right. Take this pill.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And isn't that what you were working with Rhonda? Didn't she blow out her knee and has no ACL, or, and she's
right.
Yeah, she's still and she was still competing with that, right?
Right. Yeah. So that was the super
incredible.
cool thing. Right. So I ended up working with her husband, Travis. I got a call from another guy in the WWE. His name's Roderick Strong. And I had worked with his wife, Marina Schaefer, who was Rhonda's roommate. So I flew out to California. Unfortunately, it was right. I was supposed to meet Rhonda at that time. And unfortunately, she had just lost a holy home. So I ended up not getting to meet her, but I ended up working with all these other people and connected into, some of the people from the WWE as well. So Travis had ankle surgery. Rhonda's husband, he was a top 5 heavyweight fighter in the UFC as well. And so I got a call from Roderick, and basically he's like, hey, do you think maybe, you'd be interested in working with Rhonda and Travis? Travis just had surgery. I know you just moved out to California. And I was like, what, are you kidding me? Of course, this is like a huge opportunity. He's like, okay, well, I'll hook you up with their number and stuff, and you guys can talk to them and get this thing, figured out. So basically at first I ended up working with Travis on his ankle surgery, and everything was going great. And Rhonda at the time was preparing for WrestleMania, which was the cool thing because it was the first time the women had ever headlined WrestleMania, right? And it was coming up. And she just in general had kind of voiced to me like, hey, I'm really banged up. My body's hurting. I'd like to do some work with you, to try to feel a little bit better. So we did some kind of like, foo-foo massage and feel good stuff, basically up until the time that until she ended up getting injured. So I didn't really know that she had the ACL tear until later. And the cool part about that for me was that if Hines Ward would be an example that people know of, especially in my world, he played his whole entire NFL career without having an ACL. And they have a name for that. It's called a coper. So you have a coper and a non-coper. So what a coper is somebody that's able to continue to play sports at a competitive level without having their surgical reconstruction done, right? So when I was coming through, that was when all the research was coming out on how these people were able to do this. And then, surprisingly enough, like we just said, it all comes back to them having basically a better nervous system. Right. Their nervous system functions at a higher level. They're more coordinated. Their body awareness is better. So they end up being able to keep their body in the correct position without needing that ligament. And when you think about it on our end, biomechanically, it's really crazy because when you see your average person with an ACL tear, they just can't function. Right. So to imagine that somebody's going to be able to do that is amazing. So then Rhonda ends up breaking her hand in WrestleMania. Right. And she ends up basically having a pin put in it, and they call me up and they're like, hey, guess what? Rhonda needs therapy. Perfect. I've been coming out here working with Travis. So we get started on I think it was her right hand first. And then right as soon as we got finished, I think it was August, we had just basically been finishing up the rehab for her right hand. And her big thing was she wanted to be able to punch and hit the bag again and grapple. And basically she, was on a set for, I think it's called Fox 911, and she was doing a stunt on a boat. I don't know if you saw that show where they made it like they flooded the Santa Monica Pier. It was a pretty cool, looking thing. And she was a firefighter in the show, and she was climbing up onto a boat. And as she climbed up onto this boat, it was tipped on its side. She grabbed like where the door was, and the door handle came down onto her hand and severed her finger. Yeah, it was nasty.
Like gone off.
Like almost like hanging by a thread, like literally hanging by the one tendon. So that's what I get the next morning, right? I wake up to this text
like a hot
message
dog.
with her holding her finger. Yeah. And it's like literally like hanging like this. I posted it on my Instagram and stuff. You guys could find that picture. Right. Yeah. It was nasty. So then I ended up spending the next, basically the rest of the time up until COVID, rehabbing her and working with her. Yeah. You know what that is? No. It didn't change anything for us at all. Right. Yeah. And Rhonda, the interesting thing about her, she's a very big, like doomsday kind of prepper type of person. And, she has a year's worth of supplies at her house and everything. And so when this all happened, she just kind of shut everybody out and said, hey, I'm going to take my time away and try to stay healthy. And the cool part is she was pretty much at the end of her rehab process with me anyways. So do
you have her address just in case anybody wants to?
Yeah, here it is. Right here. I got her phone number.
Use those supplies.
Right. Yeah, I tell you what, I wouldn't go out there messing with those folks. If I was anybody listening, they're the last people you want to mess with. Yeah. And that was one of the coolest things about them. And most of the athletes I've worked with, I say this all the time, like, number one, they have such a strong belief in their foundation for whatever they're doing. Their belief systems are just like a rock, and then most of them are just really good people in general. Right. And it's been such Rhonda and Travis were actually probably the best that I ever worked with. They were just super hospitable and just, always concerned about what I had going on. And even especially when I moved out here to California, and it was almost some therapy sessions for me. They were helping me get through the process. So.
To be continue.
Hey, Jason.
Yes, Mr. Craig.
That was another awesome episode, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if people want to get a little bit more action and learn how to do write 100,000 in premium off of even the worst internet leads, where could they go?
They can go to live.teledudes.com.
Ooh, that sounds exciting. Are we going to be there?
Yes. It's a weekly call that we're doing right now it's live, and it will show you the process. The entire process is super awesome.
I love it. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Sign up right now, live.teledudes.com.
Live.teledudes.com. That's live.teledudes.com.
Hey, Craig, there's a new community that we are starting that I cannot wait to tell everybody about. It is our live texting community where you and I are going to answer people's questions and give them free content, right?
Are you kidding me? We get to talk to them?
Yeah, which is awesome, but they have to opt in. They have to text us at 520-214-2219. That's 520-214-2219.
Nice.
Craig, are you going to respond to these texts?
I'm going to respond to them for sure. Live.
I'm into it too. It's going to be awesome. And it's going to be our new texting community where we're going to get back to everybody that we can and drop some crazy content, free content, and free the calculator that you just came up with. That's right. The calling calculator, sales material. I mean, everything for insurance agents. This is it. It's the best texting community out there for insurance agents.
Well, what the heck is that number again? I can't remember it.
It's 520-214-2219. That's 520-214-2219. 520-214-2219.
I love it. I'm going to text it right now.
520-214-2219.
All right. I'll see you later, Mr. Jason.
Bye, Mr. Craig.
Wait, do they even listen to this on the radio anymore?
I love it. I love it.
Nice.
All right.